Good to go?
We are good to go.
All right. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for sticking around late. I'm sorry we're a little slow getting kicked off here. I guess we're here just, I don't really have a firm plan or anything. We're going to open up the floor and just let anyone ask any questions they want. And then, we have some demos that we can do to fill time if there's not questions.
We brought random equipment.
Yeah.
This is our attempt to just like, hey, let's try this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So.
But maybe we can start, each of us give an intro.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, I'm Nick Mueller. I'm from a company called HD Retrovision. We did component cables, which now exist. Last year when we did this panel, they didn't exist yet, so that's progress. So we did component cables for Super Nintendo and Genesis, and really the mission behind our company in general is just to make things more plug and play, accessible, affordable for you to get good quality video out of your consoles.
Get background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm an electrical engineer. Is what I studied, and that's kind of my interest in this. And I've been playing Sega Genesis since I got one when I was 5 years old for Christmas.
I'm Steve, also on the other half of HD Retrovision. Do most of the engineering and hardware design, and my background, again, electrical engineering, and I just love retro games, even though I haven't had time to play them in a couple of years. So, I do touch them, I do plug them and turn them on and look at test patterns, but that's just about it at this point. Hopefully in the future we get to actually use some stuff I make. But like Nick said, our mission is to just preserve this, to make this new technology that gets shoved down our throats work with the old technology we love. So in the most accessible way possible, affordable. We're trying to bring it to more people. Like a lot of these methods exist, but we want to make it cheaper and more accessible to people. That's it.
I'm Bob. I run the website at RetroRGB.com. My background is just general nerdiness and beer. My cousin Scott has been a partner in gaming since we were little kids, and we kind of wanted to get back into gaming once we got Wii and Virtual Console, and we kept finding little things that just bugged us. It wasn't the same, didn't feel right. So I started a Google Doc that I thought maybe one or two people might want to read that kind of documented how I got the older consoles to work better, and that eventually turned into a website and all of my free time. So, but the website's basically about the best way to play the older consoles. And last year, the three of us did a panel here, and we did a pretty in-depth overview of how analog video signals works. It was super nerdy and awesome. I was really happy we did that. And then we ended up, kind of concentrating on the best ways to play the consoles on the older hardware. So, a console like a Super Nintendo, if you hooked it up to a really great CRT TV, you could accomplish that now pretty cheaply. Same thing with older technology like RGB monitors or, certain broadcast monitors that were thousands when we were kids are now hundreds, and probably going back up to thousands now that retro gamers are buying them again. But so this year, I think we wanted to concentrate on the opposite of that because the other last year's panels on YouTube, I think it's pretty good. And this year, it's if you don't have the option of an RGB monitor, eventually they're going to go away. So people are going to buy them all up. They're eventually going to break. What do you do next? And their company makes a great solution, and I'm trying every solution, and it ranges from $40 to thousands, depending on how far you want to go. So I guess we'll start by doing a very brief overview of why it's an issue on newer TVs. And if there's anybody that's as nerdy as we are that wants the in-depth view, you could just check on YouTube on my, right on my channel. You'll see us last year get in depth. But I'll run through the 1-minute version, and then I'll have Steve correct all my mistakes because he's the expert. But basically, all of these consoles, their video chips generate an RGB signal. It's actually 4 signals: red, green, blue, and sync. So if you ever see on the old TVs, everything gets a little crazy and wobbly, that's sync. And then in order to play them, especially in America, it would be broken down into S-video, so it separates the color and the video signals. And then composite is what most of us probably use for the 90s consoles, and that combines everything into one. And then RF, which is just the worst. That combines all video and audio, and kind of does, which is just a layman's term thing, it's almost like broadcasting a TV signal through a wire into your TV. So you get a ton of interference. It's pretty bad. So when you start with these older consoles, you want to always start with the best possible signal, which is the original RGB signal that is generated in. And RGB is not a component. The little circle plugs on the back of some TVs now are red, green, and blue. That's called YPBPR component. I kept getting that acronym wrong last year. I was
There's
like,
like
why I have to
versions of it.
yeah, so that's pretty much it. So the basic, very basic, that we'll talk a little more about is that you could, if your TV accepts RGB, cool. Most don't in North America. Actually, most of the world don't. Really, just in Europe. You can convert it to component. There's generic component converters. Some are good, most are not. These guys make specialty cables that are designed specifically for consoles, which is why I always recommend it, because it's not just a general thing. It's very specific for video games and game signals. And then you could change those signals to match the resolution. So I guess now it's your turn.
I mean, that was pretty much spot on. So you're saying you start off with RGB and you go down, you keep compressing it down, and then the TV has to undo all those steps, and every step introduces different types of visual artifacts, different types of noise. Probably the worst step is when you combine the black and white and color information. That is very difficult to separate. So that's why you get, and it shows up a lot on Genesis, where you get like color rainbow effects on just something that's supposed to be a hard black and white edge, because it's misinterpreting that as color, and so you get like a rainbow effect. That's really the hardest. That's why S video looks really good, because that's before that step where it combines the color and the black and white into composite. So going back from composite to S video is very detrimental to the visual quality of the signal. So
to add on to that, there's a little more complexity there too, because these consoles were outputting a very special timing signature to trick CRTs to do 240p, and like the TVs we got there may not necessarily know what 240p is anymore, because they're not designed to handle that timing signature. So what they think they're getting is 480i, and they might do some things that add lag to your game, which ruins something like Mega Man for most people, and it can make it look bad. So, I mean, depending on how picky you are, you might care or not care that the Chaos Emerald that's blinking in Sonic is combed or disappeared or solid, depending on what your TV does.
or flashing,
Yeah.
which is supposed to do.
So that's kind of the issue with newer TVs, is older consoles, for the most part, output 240p, which is 320 by 240 progressive scan. There's more finite resolutions and fresh frequencies, but just to kind of make it simple for the table demo is, and on an old CRT, resolution didn't really matter. It just kind of accepted it and drew it on the tube. But all flat panels have a set amount of pixels. So not only do you have to stretch that image, but then the panel itself, the chips that are in the TV, have to actually understand what that signal is. And since 240p was a gaming thing, it wasn't a movie thing, a lot of TVs don't even understand how to interpret it, and you get weird artifacts. Like this one's hooked up with just composite, so you have the ugliness of composite and the weird 240p-ness of it. So the options that you have nowadays is, if you want, a really great signal, you take the RGB out, and like what I do personally in my living room, because I try to keep all my nerdy stuff in the office, so is I just have like my SNES and Genesis with their cables plugged into my 1080p TV through a component, because that is zero lag. But then you get these things called upscalers, where it could actually multiply the amount of pixels and fit the panel perfect. So you get a really sharp image, looks crystal clear. But anytime you introduce a level of processing, you introduce lag. And just this morning, testing it to making sure everything worked, I hooked up this TV that a friend of mine let me borrow because it's lightweight and easy to carry, plugged in their cables and played a round of F-Zero. Looked pretty good. It didn't really interpret 240p as well as it should have, but it did a good enough job, and I enjoyed it. I tested this TV that has less than 2 frames of lag, because I test every TV I own now, because that's what my life's become. And then I hooked up with this thing, which I hate these things so much, but it's the $30 SCART to HDMI upscaler, which actually means it's perfect for things like a quick demo, or if your capture card doesn't mind the weird signal this outputs, you get a great thing for streaming or anything like that. And as soon as I plugged this in and did the same level 1, Mute City of F-Zero, the lag was just unbelievable. I mean, it's because these things have about 5 frames of lag. Add that too, that's 7. So, I went from, doing pretty good to now I came in just barely first. And it's like, that's a great way to gauge these things. It's, oh, well, I don't really notice lag. Well, if you play 3 rounds with 2 frames of lag, another 3 rounds with 7, and you're losing, then you do notice lag, even if you don't know that you're noticing it.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, when they first moved to all this flat panel stuff, they're like, I used to be able to beat that Boston Mexican. I remember, like, I just can't do it now, and they don't know why, and it turns out it's...
My favorite example of that is Phone Dork, when he was demonstrating this actual adapter with Mega Man. We're jumping on timing the platforms that are dropping, and he's losing his mind screaming at the TV. I'm like, that's how I felt when I was trying to do that mini game in Zelda Oracle of Seasons. It's captured my anger perfectly. So,
do you want to open floor for questions? Yeah.
You just mentioned the number of frames of lag on normal versus adding that box. How do you actually measure that? I want to go home for this.
Great question. There are devices you could actually buy to do this, but there's issues. I'm going to try not to nerd out too far here, but if you test lag with these very specific devices at the upper left corner of the screen versus the bottom right corner, you'll actually get kind of a different thing because of the way TVs draw lines. So the way I do it is I take something like an old console of SNES, and I use Artemio's 240p test suite that has a stopwatch, and it's literally just like a stopwatch on it, and it shows the amount of frames, seconds, and milliseconds. And I split it between a tube TV and a flat screen TV. And then I used to use my DSLR, but to be honest, just a crappy phone with a slow-mo mode. You just use the slow-mo feature, take I try to take like a minute video, and then I go through and VLC media player, and I just kind of scroll through, and every time it matches up, I'll take a screenshot and then average the lag. So this one never really went, the most lag this one had I saw was just under 2 frames, and mostly more like 1.5, so I figure, I took 20 screenshots and averaged it.
Just keep in mind that like a lag number of 2 frames would be like on a specific input. Like I've seen where composite has a certain amount of lag, and then maybe component has more lag, and then depending what type of HDMI resolution you feed into it, if it's 480i, 480p, so they could all be different lag numbers.
Yeah, everything has a factor in it, because you're going through the processing of the chips inside of your display to the panel. So depending on the hardware that's in the TV makes a very big difference. That's what's a lot of the higher end TVs, the difference is the chips that they have in them, and it's the same actual panel between, the $3,000 and the $5,000 model. It's really just the processing in it. So, and it's funny too, because my plasma TV I have at home, not all plasmas, but the one that I use, the lag is exactly the same no matter what resolution, no matter what input, no matter what signal, 480p, 240p. But I've seen TVs where everything's different. Just like Steve said, composite to component, 720p versus 480p is actually a slightly different thing of lag. So it's hard to judge.
There's a pretty popular website out there called rtings.com, the ratings without the A. And they, for a while now, have been doing lag measurements, I believe just over the HDMI port, but I've been talking to them a little bit on the side, and I think next year they're kind of interested in adding retro gaming tests for newer TVs into their lineup, or their suite of all these tests. So you hopefully will be able to go to a website like theirs and just say, okay, this TV is going to be 2 frames of lag, and it processes 240p correctly, or maybe it doesn't. So
instead of me going into Costco with a Sega Nomad,
right,
which I've done several times, you found some really good TVs that way that were really affordable.
Yeah, that's been on my list of things to do too. I was going to drag Scott and just go in. There was a Best Buy in Norwalk by where I live, and I went in to scope the place out, and I was going to go talk to a manager, and I realized there was like 150 TVs. So I was like, okay, I think I need to do a little bit more research, plan out the ones that I want to test, and go back. But The sites are a good reference, but a lot of the things those sites do is they'll take a TV, they'll test one, and they'll email Vizio, yeah, so is this the same for all sizes? And they'll say, yeah, sure. So the 50-inch that they tested has a different chip inside of it than, or even a definitely different panel, obviously, than like the 40-inch, the 32-inch. Because I bought one, I was all excited, like, wow, this website says it has less than 1 frame of lag. I brought it home and it was 5. Like, 5. Not even like, well, maybe I'm exaggerating. I did it 4 times, all the different inputs, and one HDMI input was slower lag than the rest. It was, it was kind of mind-blowing on how it even was made like that. But yeah, the worst, not in-game mode on the other HDMI was 7.5, and in-game mode on the better one was 5. So you definitely, it stinks. You gotta make sure, if you're really doing this for gaming, that you buy a TV that somebody else has verified, or if you have the guts to go and test it, make sure you can return it. Luckily, Target will let you return anything, so it's fine. But
Yeah, I've bought some stuff from Target and returned it. Yeah.
So is the way, when you test just for lag, do you hook up a component into an analog TV, or a composite into an analog TV and your HD TV at the same time?
So it depends on the setup. When I do it at home, I have a G-SCART switch that has 2 outputs. So just one output would go into, like, if I'm testing through HDMI, like it would go through the open source scan converter and then into a TV. But yeah, sometimes I just use a Y-splitter and use their cables instead of a component, because a bunch of my RGB monitors accept a component in, so I can actually just use the Y cable and have one go to the flat screen and one go to the tube. That doesn't affect lag, right?
I've done that. No. maybe 10 nanoseconds. I actually used the Nomad to do that test once.
Oh yeah?
I used the Nomad screen as the reference, and the thing I hooked up into, I have the software, so we can actually do a test.
That is a great idea with the Nomad screen itself. Does it have 1 frame of lag on it or something? So you gotta make sure to calculate that in.
Probably.
Of course I tested it. As soon as I got the Nomad, that was the first thing I did. Like,
okay.
But I can test the lag on this freaking thing.
Well, yes. So it's not the best reference, but...
but if you're talking about 5 frames to 1 frame, then absolutely a good reference. But,
Guy in the PlayStation shirt.
On the subject of, you brought up RGB monitors, any advice for actually tracking one with RGB down?
So here's the short story on that. When I first got into the website, it was 4 or 5 years ago, and it was just at that point where people still had old tech, and they were actually having to pay companies to go in and throw them out and then dispose of them. So that was right at the tail end of the point. You could call a lot of these broadcast centers and any kind of hospital that has medical imaging and say, hey, I collect old equipment. I will get rid of all this stuff and carry it out for free. And they'll go, oh great, it'll save us And you could just walk in there. Some people would sell it to you, but the problem is most of them have already been thrown out. So it's not that the people that get them now throw them on eBay and try to overcharge them, but all the places that used to have them, they needed the space, so they threw them out, got rid of them, donated them, whatever. There's still a few websites that sell medical equipment. The good part of that is broadcast equipment was usually left on 24/7. The medical equipment very often was only turned on when they needed it. So one of my friends works for a doctor's office that has my same model RGB monitor. She says she's worked there 9 years, they haven't turned it on once. So, I keep telling her, don't you ever let them throw that out. That's going to go right in my basement, so stuff like that. But it's really just, if you live near a city, keep every day, check Craigslist, check eBay, and hope you find somebody honest. Anybody in the retro gaming community is usually policing other people, so if it's one of us, you're going to get it for a fair price. But I've seen people just, somebody put the same monitors I have up for like $5,000. And I texted a bunch of people. I think me, Scott, and a bunch of other people kept offering them $1 on eBay just to get asked.
There were actually 2 monitors up for bid last night.
I saw coming out and I was so mad. I saw that, I'm like, I should save my money and go to the auction.
Yeah, I think the one was 13-inch and sold for maybe $130. And then the 19-inch sold for $220. So it wasn't bad prices, but it's starting to get up there.
And it works too.
Yeah.
Everything, so.
Yeah.
Do you guys notice any sort of, at least I have with AV splitters, like you degrade the image a little bit, it's a little dimmer? Or any
Splitters or distribution amplifiers?
Like a splitter, like if you hook 5 devices up into one.
So you're talking about just like splitting the connection with wires?
Yeah.
So,
No,
Not-
that's a switch box, right? Like a manual
Yeah, like
AV
a
switch box.
oh, a switch box? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really hit or miss, right?
So not a lot of people agree with me. I prefer mechanical passive switch boxes, but there's other people who prefer power switch boxes. I would agree with that if it's built correctly. I've opened and analyzed electronics in some of them, and they're very poorly made. They put transistors that saturate because they don't put enough negative voltage in, and so if you want a good one that's powered, you gotta pay money for it. Otherwise, if you want something that's affordable and works decently well, and you don't have like, you're not extending like 20 foot of cabling to another 20 foot of cabling, then I think a mechanical switch box works well.
And we use, both of us have this one by a company called Pelican that we really like.
Yeah, as long as you use good cabling and don't use too long of cabling, then the mechanical ones work well. I don't know if you have any opinions.
Yeah, I agree 100% on the mechanical. I've very often used like regular AV switchers for component, so left, right, video, I just plug component into them. I had a switch that was that and S-video, and I bought a little adapter so I could actually run left, right audio through the S-video thing, so.
I've done that before.
Yeah, you get, that way it's a really cheap way to do it. I agree that the passive ones, it's basically, it's almost the equivalent of just unplugging and replugging. Unless you turn all the consoles on at the same time, I don't think you'd ever get interference. And the ones that you get that have been designed for gaming, like I'm a big fan of the G-SCART switch. I am buddies with the guy, but I'm not just kissing his ass. This is like, he designed it directly to be used with these things, so it does work well. I don't know if it's the best, but it's the best that I've tested. So as long it could be powered, as long as it's something that's been designed for it. The one thing that I have very little experience in that I really want to learn more about is which types of HDMI switchers. And Scott was actually talking on the podcast with me about this a few weeks ago, but it's because of something called HDCP, you can't really have much of a mechanical switch on that. It loses the handshake of the TV, and so you really need a powered HDMI switch. And some detect signal the wrong way, and some actually process the image, so it adds lag for no reason. And so that's the one thing that I really would like. I think I should probably, I have a buddy of mine that owns a company that does AV installs, and I keep forgetting to ask him, but I should probably find out from him the best way to start. He'll probably tell me to go get a Denon AV receiver for $1,000. So.
I've been using that 2-port one that you guys talked about on that episode, and it works.
The
monoprice one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one is good, but once you need more than two, that's where the problem is.
What does your Pelican switcher accept? Like, is it a SCART switch or is it?
Component.
It's a component.
And it's got a composite on there too.
And it has Ethernet.
Yeah, and
Which I don't use. And digital coax. It's just got like 6 coax and an Ethernet.
Yep.
Cool. 3x1.
It's not bad.
It's like $20.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure I understand the cables that you guys make. So ultimately, it's the same RGB SCART, but it's in component out. Is that how that works?
There is a circuit board in here that was designed from scratch. And also, we took measurements from probably like 13 or 14 SNES consoles, and we tried to find like these sweet spots of the voltage signals coming out of them. And we narrowed it down to 2 fields, and that's because there's like a contrast switch on here that can change the gain. So it works with the older SNESs, which are a little bit weaker signals, and the newer SNESs, which have a little bit brighter, more voltage on them. And so it's able to interface with that. But yeah, it's basically, it takes the RGB from the console and it does a color space conversion into component, because almost all our TVs have component. You just got to deal with the little quirky problems we talked about earlier, because some TVs don't like project it completely, the retro signal through a component interface. Others might process it poorly, like they said with the flashing with the Chaos Emeralds, like just any type of 60 hertz flash, like when you get hit by a bad guy, you flash really fast. Sometimes that doesn't show up properly. And then sometimes it works amazing, like those TVs at Costco that it just looks flawless. So yeah, that's the gist of it. Probably rambling, I'm sorry.
No, that was actually a thing that Wes who runs the Second Opinion Games podcast. I was over at his house doing a demo of something awesome and nerdy, and I pulled out those cables and said, "Hey, have you tried these on your TV yet?" And he's got a very nice Sony TV with 4K TV with a good, it's built-in upscalers, pretty darn good. And we plugged those in, and I think we tested N64, and because 240p divides evenly into 4K, and it's got a good upscaler built in, it looked amazing. I mean, it was almost as good as a $300 FrameMeister, and those things are what, $50 now or something? 45. Yeah. So it's a fraction of the price. So if your TV's good, and especially with 4K, because the only thing that doesn't go evenly into it is 480p, as far as gaming resolutions and stuff. You could get lucky if your TV has a good enough processor in it, and all you gotta buy is just that one cable. So it kind of comes in handy.
But I think we've had people email us and said that they're bringing the cables in to test, the stores to test, to help them pick out a TV, because that's like really driving their purchase.
Yeah, and if anybody here happens to know a manager in a Best Buy, please let us know. I'll go today.
The other thing with these cables, which is not super common, you can tell right away, we were very picky about the noise level that we're willing to accept, so these are super well shielded. They took a few revisions before we got it.
They custom spun the wires for us because, and the benefit you get for this, the biggest benefit you get is that, so you have video lines and audio lines running next to each other. Without good shielding, the video couples into the audio, and because these old signals are running at 15-ish kilohertz, that's an audible frequency, and you hear this really bad humming sound. So if you have like really cheap like SCART cables, typically you'll hear that humming when it's
there's
paused.
silence,
When you pause the game and there's something on the screen, they'll be like bzzz. So
Genesis consoles when there's a white screen on.
Oh yes.
It feels like like you're electrocuted.
Right. So that actually pretty much goes away because we did extensive measurements and every piece of cable that was sent to us. So.
You have questions?
Yes, I have a Sony TV, the 4K one that you kind of similar one to what you were speaking of, and I have both of the cables, Genesis and the Super Nintendo one. And I've noticed they don't accept the 240p for the Genesis, but not the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Is that a common thing you guys do too?
We've run into that ever since we started selling to the public. We've noticed that almost all Vizios have the same issue, and then some of the Sonys do too. And we've narrowed it down to the SNES outputs a slightly odd vertical refresh rate that is slightly out of spec, and these TVs trip up on that. So it's a goofy problem, and to confirm that, I actually adjusted the clock frequency inside the SNES, and I'm still working on that to fully confirm it, but that's pretty. Like if you plug it into the OSSC, the display will say 60.09, which is not correct.
So for the interim, I think if you have any kind of device that accepts component and outputs something else, like a receiver, that's like a temporary fix at least.
Yeah,
but
a lot of people have done that and actually like the processing on the receiver better. Like you could get lucky, there's like a good processor in there.
Right, well that's actually, not to get too far off topic, but some of these receivers have the same chip that the FrameMeister has in it. So you could actually, because the FrameMeister is 2 chips, one to double the 240p, and the other one takes normal resolution and upscales it. But yeah, I mean the SNES is very problematic, and even the open source CAN converter, the OSSC, has the same issue, where most TVs that I've tested will not accept a Super Nintendo in 720p mode for it, but it would accept a Genesis and everything else I stick into it. So it's kind of funny, and it's because Steve knows way more about this than I do, but the specs for the video output now with digital are pretty exact, right? I mean, you could just, you just match up numbers and that's all you have to do, but there wasn't all of these old game consoles output a slightly different resolution, a slightly different refresh rate, and there wasn't a locked standard that you had to conform to. Mostly
Just
because
the ballpark.
yeah, because CRTs would display anything.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, it's about right.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Might be a good chance to talk about the little.
Yeah, so we try to solve that problem that you have with the Sony and a lot of the Vizios. We actually spent all this time, probably since January or February, we're trying to find a cheap component to HDMI device that will pass the 240p through to the HDMI, because like Bob said, in these timing specs for the HDMI spec, 240p is defined, where in analog it's not really defined. So you could get lucky, and if your TV doesn't accept a certain flavor of 240p over component, it might do it over HDMI. And so we finally tracked down these little adapter things that we started selling a few prototypes on our website, on Friday, but it won't be available in public till tomorrow. We want to give some people first dibs that have issues and contacted us, but that might work for you. You can give it a shot, but if you have a question, you can email. Yeah, it's actually
This one?
yeah. So it's a PS2 to HDMI converter, but I noticed that the chips they use inside actually does this function, but you can't just buy any one of these. They have different guts inside. Anything from China has different. Wow, this USB cable just
Broke off inside it? I needed it, not me, actually. Yeah.
cool. So we made this little PCB that goes into here and then breaks out the two breakout cables that you can, instead of just plugging into a PS2, you can put any component cable into here and give you 240p HDMI on the other end. So,
And these things are pretty cheap, right?
you can't just buy any one of these, so we sell this as a kit.
Oh, okay.
Because I tracked down the right
So you
one.
try, all right, you're
Yeah.
able to. So it comes with this, and then.
Yeah, they look identical on the outside, and then you'll find.
Anything, I bet you eventually they're gonna change the guts inside of this.
I hope so.
And then, well, we might not
It's
get
gonna
anything
get
out the
worse.
other
Things
side.
are getting worse,
Things are getting
not better.
worse,
Yeah.
because I've tested maybe 14 different components, HDMI boxes, and they all had an issue when you crack them open. They all use the same chip from this Chinese company called Macro Silicon.
Yeah, they're moving away from the older, more expensive chips that work
They want to drive the
to a
cost down.
single cheap
Yeah.
chip, because they don't need all that extra functionality, since that thing is really just designed for PS2. Some of those other devices are not really intended for what we're trying to get them to work.
Yeah. So.
In terms of that box, so they normally stretch the image as well, right? The HDMI converter.
It depends.
It distorts the
It
image.
depends on your TV.
Yeah, most TVs do have the 4x3 mode too. I'm pretty sure yours
You
does.
get
as well.
forced to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you have the same model West does, then not only do you have to force it, you also have to zoom it. But it's not for whatever reason, on my plasma, if I zoom it, it looks bad. It looks like somebody just stretched an image. But on Wes's, when it zoomed it, I think it actually it interpreted the signal different, because then it fit pretty nice. There were still bars around it, and there wasn't that stretched, soft look. It looked very sharp. So the Sonys do a really good job of that.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I was hitting along the lines of that gentleman's question there. I tried a Sega Saturn with a SCART cable the other day into, I think, one of the boxes that you've got sitting on the table.
Yeah.
And the image on my HD TV was stretched and was crazy blocking. And I was expecting, everyone was talking about how SCART, to HDMI turns out to be a great picture. And I'm sitting there going, this looks terrible.
Yeah, and this has the different modes too. This has 800 by 600 and the square one, so that might have been an issue with your TV depending. And 1080p freaks out sometimes on this one, so I would try it with 720. But to be honest, these things, I bought it just to see how bad it actually was. But there's very few scenarios I would ever recommend this. And no offense, you did the same thing a million other people do, and oh, it's a cheap converter, how bad could it be? But my capture card won't even work with this. It'll play for about a minute, and then it'll just lose signal.
Yeah, it sounds like the FrameMeister is worth the money they asked for, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be cheaper, but the open source scan converter is very close to. If the 720p compatibility was higher, I would hands down recommend it over it. But the FrameMeister is great, and it just works. Like, you go to FireBrandX's website, you download his profiles onto an SD card, you stick them in, and your setup consists of click, click, Super Nintendo, done, and that's it. So whereas, there are a lot of other solutions, it's a lot of setup and a lot of everything else. But yeah, it works with every TV, the lag is very minimal, and it is, if you're really looking for upscaling solutions, at the moment today, that is the one to get still.
Thank you.
Just to continue the HD Retrovision commercial, we are looking into, very actively right now, looking into adapter pieces for our Genesis cable that would just, slip on the top and convert the connector to a Saturn connector and let you use it with that. So that's kind of what we see as probably the next thing that will come out from us is
That's
one
exciting.
of those for Saturn, PlayStation, Neo Geo. But
Yeah, now your cable currently works with the master system with that adapter that it comes with, right?
yep,
As
with
well
the,
as.
with the Genesis One adapter. Yeah.
Don't plug it into an AES, it's a different pin. Even though it's an
Right.
8-pin DIN, it's not the same.
Right, and then I think you said you can also use it on a TurboGrafx with that other company's.
DB
Yeah,
Electronics.
DB Graphics Booster works really well, and I think Renee, who, that's his company, he mentioned to me that he just got some more in. And
This weekend, I think
And
he
he's
said.
got to test through them, and then so they might be up for sale soon.
Yeah, and I have a lot of the stuff I modded at home that doesn't natively have an AV output. On DigiKey, you can get the connectors where it's so easy to install. They're circular, and then you can just screw them right in. And I've been-
Panel mount.
Yeah, the panel mount ones. Yeah, and I've been using the Genesis cable on those. As you're just going to match the output of the Genesis. So for anybody that's done that stuff, it's not as hard as it seems. And you just know that the Genesis cables don't have the capacitors and resistors in them. So I just match that up, and it seems to work fine. But that's non-tested, so don't hold them responsible. That's just what I do sometimes. I think you had a question before.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, the Super Nintendo AV cables we have, will those work with any of the Nintendo AV output as long as they're RGB modded?
So
The only one we officially support, because when you say the word modded, that can mean a bazillion different things, right?
like we're not going to recommend something coming off of eBay pre-modded. Like we've seen enough pictures of total disasters.
Yeah.
And so when we say we can't officially support those things because there's no way for us to like diagnose.
When
if
somebody contacts us and is like, I have this issue, I got this modded from this, it's like, how do you troubleshoot that when you don't have a good starting point, because it could be the mod itself.
Yeah.
So the only thing we officially support that's not SNES right now is N64 mod that Wes from Retrofixes does. So as long as you get it modded by him, we guarantee it'll work, and if there's an issue, then we can help troubleshoot it because we know what we're dealing with. But people have reported that they got our cables to work on
AV
Famicom that's been modded, any top loader that they put in a custom like connector that was RGB with the NES RGB board. A lot of people from Europe really like our cable with PAL GameCubes. They had a lot of success with that.
Yeah, they've worked on everything. I guess as a company, they can't officially say this, but as a fan, I can. Anything that's been modded correctly, it'll work with, definitely. And that's the modded correctly part. And I still get at least one email a month about somebody saying, "Hey man, I read your site and I found somebody on eBay that that said he does the mod just like yours and it doesn't work. Can you help me out?" And I always say the same thing. Sure, would you mind opening it up and sending me pictures? And I cringe. They're just usually it looks like a glue gun exploded on the bottom of it. The last one I got, I felt so bad for the guy. And he's a Twitch streamer too, and he was a popular one, and he was just starting to get into retro Twitch streaming as well, and it was giving him some weird artifacts, and then the guy wouldn't return them, and I was like, look, just call eBay, they're actually good for the buyers on this one, get your money back, and if you have a problem, send it to me. But the guy ended up giving him his money back. I felt really bad. I'm like, you gotta just, and it's hard too, because if you don't, how would most people that's never got into this know to do that? Know not to buy off eBay, go through reputable sellers. So it's a hard situation, but definitely either do it yourself and take your time, do it slowly, or find somebody that's got a reputation of doing it well. So, but yeah, they've worked in everything I've thrown about them. So.
Yep.
Last question there, since you guys do this all day, every day. I know all these solutions are better than composite, but S-video versus the component stuff versus going the RGB SCART to HDMI conversion methods. I mean, is it worth the hassle to go all the way there? Is any of that stuff? Is there a sweet spot that's quick and easy to work?
That's a loaded question, because you first have to decide what kind of device you're using it on, and then you have to decide how picky your eyes are. There's people who can deal with a lot of, they don't notice a lot of artifacts too.
And the hardest part too is if you just, like when I bought my plasma TV, I bought it because I wanted to watch 3D movies, and that was it. I had no idea that the processor inside was actually great for retro gaming. It just, I happened to get lucky. And when I tested component in, old retro consoles to component in on it, I loved it. I thought it was great. And I generally use RGB monitors, but if I didn't have the room for one, like when I'm moving to Manhattan soon, unfortunately, so now I have to, I don't have room for all this, so I'm definitely just going to be doing that. But it's situational. So the one thing that I always recommend people start with is get a Wii, an older Wii. You can get really cheap, plug them into an old CRT if you have the room for it, and go from there. Most people that aren't hardcore gamers, they just want that little shot of nostalgia, will go play Sonic the Hedgehog and Zelda: Link to the Past, and they'll love it, and then they'll never touch it again, and now you're only out like $100, and it's fine. What happened to Scott and I was the opposite of that. We got a Wii, and we got a Link to the Past, and then we went, well, why don't we get a retro controller adapter to play, a SNES controller on the Wii? And then it's, well, why don't we get a CRT to put it on? And then it's, well, remember we were in that game store and they were talking about RGB back in the day? And then a million hours of our life later, here we are today. So it was worth it for me because the first time I played, the MSU audio hacked, so it's the orchestral audio of Zelda on, a 20 or a 32-inch widescreen BVM on an RGB mounted SNES. Our 11-year-old selves would have punched themselves in the face if they had to do that. So it was worth it for us, definitely, without a doubt. But most of the people I know are just thrilled that they get to have their old school experience on the CRT with a Wii. And some go a step further. A lot of Genesis fans from back in the day will buy one, use it on the CRT, use their cables to go in, because there's no native S-video output of a Genesis. So that's the perfect solution. Go right like an old Trinitron. And that is good enough for your average person. It's just if you really love some of the older ones, that's when you really get into spending the money.
Another kind of side question again about the, let's just say Super Nintendo cable. Will that, if we're using a CRT that allows component, will a light gun work with it?
Yep.
That's fully supported?
Yeah, we tested that back when we were QAing for Kickstarter. Cables.
Don't remind me of that. You're QAing 1,000
we
cables
tested
4 days straight.
We tested the Genesis light gun as well.
Well, the Lethal Force.
Yeah, right, yeah. And then the Super Scope.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I'm new to the scene and I want to buy a monitor, is there a simple rule of thumb or a place where I can look, or a brand or a model that you guys recommend and is generally pretty good for just retro gaming?
Like a flat panel TV? Or
Flat panel TV, yeah.
Certain level of Samsung and above seem to be the best in our experience. The really cheap Samsungs are terrible. But once you hit the 5000 series, which is, it's not an expensive series of Samsung TV, it's just not their dirt cheap versions. Those seem to
They
There's a-
process things well and work well.
Yep, there's a couple of monitors, like actual computer monitors with HDMI in, of course. They're all about 23 inches, but they're rated at less than 1 frame of lag. There's
They're meant for people,
Liz, I think you say it, the guy, one of the guys online, he has one. Yeah, they're the BenQ. I have them listed on my site, and I'm about to order a 4K one that supposedly nobody that I know from the retro gaming community's tested it, but I think on one of the lag test websites that they were talking about, it says it's equal to those two. And because it's 4K, it would be, integer into it. So that would be, there are monitor solutions for that. TVs are the issue still, because I still don't think a lot of the gaming, if Microsoft and Sony had made a big deal about this, your TV would have like an energy rating and a lag rating next to it. I guess check their site right now has a bunch of good TVs listed. I'm working on it, but that is a good question. And for the CRT part of it, that's something I realized as well. We getting on time, right?
Yeah,
we
all right.
need backup time.
All right. For the CRTs, any of the old Sonys, the only thing to stay away from is the flat CRTs, because those always mess with light guns, and it sometimes messes with. You get that effect where if something's running sideways, it looks like it's doing this as it's going, like a wave going by. So I would just stay away from flat screen CRTs. That was just a gimmick. That wasn't a thing. So, but yeah, any of those you can still find it at like Goodwill for nothing.
Oh, yeah,
So,
tons of them. Every time I go in, there's a bunch of them all have component on them too.
So yeah, before we go, thanks everyone for coming. We'll be around. You can just come talk to us about anything. We have some swag here if you want to grab it. This is actually a keychain of the first revision of the circuit board that ended up in here.
That's awesome.
You can grab one. You can also, if you're a beer drinker, there's bottle openers too. But yeah, this is how small it originally was, and it kind of grew to about that size.
Well, that old first size fit into here, but
Yeah.
then it was impractical to make a special Genesis thing to fit something,
Yeah.
so we put it in. But yeah, we have T-shirts too
Yep.
for sale. Because somebody asked us yesterday if we sold T-shirts, so we brought a couple in today.
Yeah. So yeah, we're total degenerates in selling them out of the trunk of our car. We don't have a table or anything. If you want a T-shirt, come talk to us.
And yeah, just email us if you ever have any questions. There's a lot of people that ask us general like video questions on and stuff, and we try to answer every reasonable question. So
I answer every single question except, I hate you, your website sucks. I was like, fuck you. All right, thanks a lot, guys.